wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
This better not awaken anything in me.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
I'm responsible for my own happiness. I can't even be responsible for my own breakfast.
We have Santa Claus. Assemble.
Welcome to Nerd Here Weekly's Daredevil recap show. Bruno, here we are doing it again. We don't really have a way to start this one, but yeah, we're doing another. This was big. We're excited. This is, I feel like a lot of stuff that we've been waiting for sort of started to drip out this episode. We've got a lot to talk about.
There's a lot of stuff that we've been building towards that we seem to be still building towards, but we are right on the edge for most of it. And I also came to the realization morning of the time that we're recording that this is pretty much like the mid-season break because because it's a 9-episode it's a 9-episode season. We're on episode 4, and then next week is going to be a 2-episode drop. So I'm excited with how things are going, and it seems like we're getting into high gear already.
Yeah, agreed. So, just so everyone's aware, spoilers up front for everything up through episode 4 of Daredevil Born Again. Spoilers for all of the original Netflix run of Daredevil and kind of the whole Defenders universe. Spoilers for anything that has ever happened in the MCU, probably, just to be safe. Anything else we might just wander into ruining for people. Spoilers for everything that's ever happened in a comic book ever.
Yeah. We're going to be getting into
that. Yeah. All right. I think that's probably a safe. Spoilers for the Ben Affleck and Jennifer Garner film Daredevil, which we always somehow manage to bring up in some capacity.
It's a good movie.
All right. Yeah. Reactions. I mean, my big reaction, my top line reaction, I think, is that Punisher's finally here. And that was exciting for me. I think that I really want to take some time to talk about that one scene. Definitely because it was just one scene. I am far from thinking that is all the Frank Castle we're going to get this season. So, yeah, I mean, I was excited for that. I think a lot of the legal drama stuff that happened in this episode was pretty heavy and intense in a good way. Really interesting. And yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I want to talk about, but what are your sort of top line thoughts about this episode, about how the season's going so far, about where we find ourselves?
I'm gonna try to get all of my criticisms out of the way first, because because they all mostly have to do with just the fact that I was aware of the reshoots that happened with the show. And so if people don't care about that discussion, if people don't care about that criticism, feel free to just skip ahead 30 seconds to a minute. I'm not sure how long I'll be on here for. But when it comes to the reshoots and when it comes to them shooting the show in two completely different periods and having two completely different stories at times, this episode was probably the most obvious out of that, where I saw sort of the stitches in between the two different stories that they were trying to tell. That being said, the two separate stories that I saw were very great in their own, each in their own way. I really liked the build-up that we saw with Matt and the build-up to his scene that we'll see with Frank, which was absolutely the highlight of the episode, which we'll be getting to. And then I also enjoyed the sort of comical build that we had with Wilson Fisk going up to Kingpin at the end of this episode for him, which again we'll be getting into. And that's just me being I guess eagle-eyed, where I just see the stitches in between and I can see the different shows. But I'm definitely one of very, very few people that saw that. And I think aside from that, this episode was really, really good.
We should mention, by the way, for anybody for our audio-only listeners, you can get this show on YouTube by going to youtube.com/nerditherefirst, where you can see me, Riley Trahan, and producer Bruno Meneses, coming to you live from my underground torture chamber, where I have prepared a very nice dinner for myself, and I'm keeping Bruno in a locked-up cell right next to my fine dining experience, and I'm not letting him out until we're done with this season of Daredevil. So you can see us in that composition on the YouTube. Um,
Is it really me that's here? It could be a scroll.
That's a good quote. Could have been a scroll. Was
Could
it
be
a
a
scroll?
scroll.
Maybe, maybe it was a scroll. Yeah, I gotta say, I am not feeling the reshoots as hard as I was for Captain America. Like, I think that the more I think about Captain America and Brave New World, the more I am like resigned that that movie, most of that movie's flaws and faults stemmed from how it was sort of jigsaw pieced together from multiple original components into one sort of Voltron.
Absolutely.
I get what you're saying, and there are definitely portions of this Born Again show where I'm like, oh, there's trial of the week legal procedural, and oh, there's like gritty sort of Netflix style street level vigilante show.
Right.
But I do feel like they sort of are flowing into each other better. And I don't find it to be as distracting as Captain America. But I take your meaning. I don't disagree. I think that there are definitely like sequences where I'm like, oh, okay, we're sort of back in this gear now.
And that's why that's why I wanted to like pretty much just talk about it and like get it out of the way, because I think for me it's the fact that like I was aware of it, and I sort of like subconsciously looked for that.
Yeah.
And I looked for those issues.
Yeah.
I don't know if like I don't know if someone who knew about the reshoots or knew about like the rewrites would notice anything going into it.
Yeah, well, that's fair. I do think, though, you know, one of the things that I was thinking about that we haven't really honed, we sort of talked around the edges of this, but we haven't gotten into it very specifically. But one of the things that I noticed sort of right out the gates this time was that this really is continuing to be tonally pretty dark for MCU general, right? Like, and you know, maybe that's the advantage of doing something on like a streamer, right? Maybe that's what the Disney Plus editions of the MCU should be doing, is like pushing the boundaries of what like the tone of this thing can be like. You know, when we think of some of our favorite Disney Plus MCU installments, right? It's things like WandaVision that really messed with kind of like what the MCU can look like. You know, I think a lot of the installments that I find more skippable are like the Secret Invasions or the Captain America or Falcon Winter Soldiers, where like it just looks MCU but on the littler screen, right?
Yeah,
the ones
like
that
we've talked about like more like time again about like the MCU sheen.
Yeah,
that they will like put over their like products, and like we've also talked about how we're not getting much of that with Daredevil Born Again.
Yeah, definitely. And so I think that you know, when you can see something where you're like, oh, this is the point of this exercise, right? Like it's on television, but they are using the fact that it's on television to like futz with it a bit, right? Whether, you know, like WandaVision used like both the history of TV and sort of the episodic style of that show to like do something really interesting with like the literal reality those characters are trapped inside of, right? And this is like take MCU but rated R, right? Or at least like a strong PG-13. We got another F-bomb this episode.
It's true.
Continue to get some pretty upsetting violence. The introduction of this costumed figure in the sewers we'll have to talk about. Muse is here now, and he was doing some pretty gross, sick stuff that I think will probably upset people. So, yeah, I just was really struck by the tone in this episode and like started to notice, I feel like, how, you know, it's definitely not like the Penguin, right, which we just got sort of in a superhero universe that was really, really sort of dark. But yeah, I was recognizing this time how I feel like it's a step or two outside of the normal stream of MCU stuff that we typically get. And I was appreciating that. I feel like I was able to say, oh, okay, here's a reason why this is a TV show and maybe not a movie. So that was good. So Bruno, at the beginning of this episode, we find ourselves, I feel like, once again having to check in on our guy Matt and how he's doing.
Right?
Like I feel like all these episodes we've started by being, you know, Matt's having a hard time in this season. Like Foggy dies, Hector dies.
And like we literally opened the episode with not only Matt having to collect the belongings that like were on Hector when he was found, but then having to console Hector's niece Angela, and that was a rough scene to watch.
Yeah, get that young woman into a Young Avengers meeting ASAP. She was
Right?
great. I thought that was a really
Absolutely.
good one scene performance that she ripped the roof off of, right? She said, you don't got to be good at math to put 1 and 1 together, you know? Like, just as a capper to this incredible monologue she gave about like the injustices of the system, which is really a big part of what this episode is about, right? Is like
Right.
injustice, is like leaving things unsettled, right? We've got is it Angela Ayala?
It's Angela Del Toro.
Del Toro. So we've
Yes.
got Angela. We've got Angela's character as the niece of Hector Ayala, who is, feels like she doesn't have justice for her uncle's murder. We have Matt, who feels like he hasn't. He gave that great big speech in the first episode about how we're all here today for justice, right?
Right.
Foggy doesn't get justice, and yeah, here at the end of this episode, we clearly have Matt still kind of grappling with what does justice for Foggy look like. We've got Frank, who his whole character is defined by like a lack of justice, sort of a hanging sense of incompletion that sort of takes him over, and he gives a couple great speeches about that when him and Matt get into an argument that made me yell kiss at my TV pretty loudly. We've got Fisk, right, who's got, we'll talk about it, but who's got these sort of continuing betrayal issues that he's going through with his wife and Adam and all of that, and sort of what his sense of justice is involved around that situation. So yeah, this was a big episode about injustice and like what happens when you don't maybe get what you were expecting. And we'll talk about the trial, or the case. It wasn't a trial, they pled on this one, but we'll talk about the case.
Oh, right.
That Matt got assigned this week. That was really for me sort of the centerpiece of the whole episode. I was really compelled by this sort of 2-scene legal proceeding that Matt did this week. But yeah, I mean, that's for me, that's the big theme we're really working with, is I feel like everybody and I feel like everyone is grappling with a sort of lack of closure. And a lot of that lack of closure goes through Matt, or goes through Matt and Fisk, but mostly Matt, right? And I feel the weight on him starting to, like, he's been holding it up, right? He hasn't been putting the Daredevil costume on, but by the time we get to the end of this week's episode, we've made jokes about it before, but he is on the edge of cracking, right?
Absolutely. Like, this is the closest we've ever gotten, just like with the way that it ended, of him just even at the start, he was already like sort of on the edge, because he was on the same rooftop where he goes back to at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
That was the same rooftop. He was just inching closer and closer to his like secret lair, and we had no idea that was there. I thought that that's what he was going to go dig up when he was going like through these weird ass tunnels and stuff, like under some place. I thought he was going after like the suit. I had no idea that it was going to be Frank.
There was this kid who lived in my neighborhood when I was growing up, and his name was Kyle. And Kyle was this little kid. I was like a teenager, and Kyle was like 5 or 6. To be honest, Kyle was probably like your age, but in my brain, he was always a little kid. And I would be like walking over to my buddy's house who lived down the street, and I'd go past this house, and pretty often Kyle and his mom would be out in the front yard, and his mom would be like gardening or whatever, and Kyle was not allowed to go in the street, right? And like that was the rule. Kyle couldn't go in the street. So like he'd be in the grass, and then he'd like slowly walk over towards the sidewalk, and then he'd be like balancing on the curb. And it was always like, let me see how close I can get without my mom yelling at me. Right. And like raptors testing the fences in Jurassic Park, like trying to push that boundary. Like, how close can I get to the literal black of the asphalt before I get in trouble. And I feel like that's the game Matt's playing this time. He's like, I'm not daredeviling. I'm not daredeviling. I'm just touching my costume and practicing with my weapons on the roof at night. But I am not, and solving crimes with my superpowers and meeting up with other vigilantes. But I am not daredeviling at all. I
And
definitely, because
and
that'd be rude to Foggy's memory. Foggy
and
didn't
flirting
like
with
it.
lawyers, flirting with other
And
lawyers.
flirting with lawyers. That's a big part about the Matt Murdock game. But yeah, like he's he's Kyle on the curb right now,
Mhm.
and like we just need one more thing to happen. And yeah, I feel like with the 2-parter coming next week, we are putting one of those costumes on. Toot sweet. All right, well, let's get into it. Yeah, we already talked about, so opening scene. We have, let's do a Young Avengers check-in, because yeah, Angela Del Toro,
Sure, yeah.
we assume a future White Tiger, either in this series
Mhm.
or potentially outside of it, beyond it. And we've sort of been like collecting Young Avengers, right? This is the
Absolutely.
thing.
No, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, this is the thing we've talked about a lot on Weekly. Like, we've sort of
Yeah.
monitored this through
Mhm.
different MCU properties.
We've started to question whether or not they're still going to be called Young Avengers, and
Yeah,
or whether
right.
they're going to be switching up to Champions, just because some of them are starting to get a little bit on the other side. But I went through it just to like see how many we've been introduced so far. If we're like being nitpicky and going in reverse order, we had Angela Del Toro just now in Daredevil Born Again, which will eventually set up White Tiger 2.
She's got
We
an amulet.
have in Agatha All Along, we saw the introduction of Billy Kaplan, and by the end of that show, he had pretty much taken on his full identity as his super identity as Wiccan,
Magic
and
powers.
that show also set up that we'll eventually be seeing his brother Tommy, aka Speed, which will probably be in Vision Quest.
Fast.
Then we had Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel, and Kate Bishop, Hawkeye, both last seen in the Marvel's post-credit scene, where it seems like the start of this team up was happening, where Kamala Khan was recruiting Kate Bishop, and they even made sure to throw a little joke in there that I think Kamala Khan straight up said, "I want to set up like a Young Avengers," and Kate Bishop responded, "I'm 26."
Yeah. So Bishop is our new Hawkeye, and Kamala Khan, in the comics, she can imbigify, but she has like light powers. Is that
It's starting to seem like she's just going to be inheriting most of like Carol Danvers' powers,
right?
but in a
Okay,
more like physical sense rather than shooting beams. They're more like, yeah,
fair enough.
maybe, or guess you could equate her to like Green Lantern would be the
Right, but
best way to put it.
okay, yeah,
Right.
cosmic power cosmic. We'll just
Mhm.
assign her general power cosmic.
I should put a quick asterisk on Kamala Khan as well as both of the Kaplans, as they could be labeled as mutants, which could put them in another property, but we're not sure.
And
Then
then
we have Cassie Lang, last seen in
yep,
Quantumania,
yep.
which may be Stature. We never got her full superhero name. That's who should be called in the comics, would be Stature.
Okay.
Riri Williams, soon to be seen in Ironheart.
Robot suit
America Chavez, last seen in Multiverse of Madness. Not
goes through
don't
dimensions.
don't quite remember where we last saw her.
Yeah, where did we leave her?
Scar, Bruce Banner's son.
Oh, is she with the wizards? Is she with like
Yes, she was left with Wong. She was
Yeah.
training with Wong. So
Yeah.
we might see her next with Shang-Chi, because I think last we saw Wong, he was studying Shang-Chi's rings or the bangles.
Yeah. Okay.
Or
That
he was
makes
training
sense.
with Abomination.
Yes, it's good that we're checking in on all these people, because
Oh
some of them
boy.
I've totally forgotten. Who did you just mention, by the way? Speaking of
I
people I
just-
don't remember at all.
I just mentioned Scar, last seen in She-Hulk. He was Bruce Banner's son,
Oh,
who he
that's
just randomly
right.
pulled in and let.
That's right. That we were just like, by the way, here's young Hulk now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His hairline is on Interpol's Most Wanted.
Yep.
And then lastly, this is a big stretch, at least on my list. I don't know if you have one. But lastly, there's Isaiah Bradley, who was seen in Falcon and Winter Soldier. Sorry. Is that his name? No,
Isaiah Bradley's the older fella.
Yes, Isaiah Bradley is his
Forgotten Captain America.
Is the Forgotten Captain America. He has a nephew or son
Yeah,
who I'm now
grandson,
blanking on the name.
Yeah.
who should eventually take on the another super soldier serum and
Yep.
become the Patriot.
And then I think probably this is not. I think your list is comprehensive, but I also had Yelena. But it seems like she's probably going Thunderbolts now.
I questioned about putting Yelena on here, but then yeah, she's in Thunderbolts. We don't know what Thunderbolts is going to turn into.
Yeah.
And then again, that brings in the age question about like
Right, yeah, about
where,
how
where does
young
she
we're
fit in with
allowed to
that?
be with these people. Yeah, but so we've got a ton of them out there, and
Mhm.
this has been supposedly on the radar, like inside Disney for a long time. I think both contract wise and also like trying to lock down sort of a new generation of talent.
Right.
Your Roger Moores, let's say, of the MCU, who could, this was a theory that was floated at the original DCEU, not James Gunn's DC universe, but
Mhm.
the Snyderverse was supposedly employing this strategy to like throw out as many characters as possible, see which ones audiences move like gravitate towards, and then we'll spotlight those. That sort of seemed like what the approach for Young Avengers was going to be, was like we've got this huge roster of multivarious heroes, all with different powers that sort of belong in different corners of the MCU. We'll stick them all in one movie, we'll see which ones pop, and then those ones will be our Captain Americas and our Tony Starks moving forward. But yeah, it's sort of been hanging out there for a long time, but now we've got like Hulklings and second White Tigers and stuff, and I'm kind of like, are we doing this or not? But
It's coming. It's coming.
they certainly seem to continue to lay track towards it. Okay, next up, we got a really quick shot here of Muse taking one of his victims into the subway, and then we go to and then that just throws us straight to credits. I thought this would be a good opportunity for us to talk a little bit about Muse, about what's going on. I know that we've talked about it in previous episodes, but now we're officially there, so thought we could plug away at it a little bit. I, on your recommendation, have been reading the Charles Soule run, so I am right
Perfect.
in the middle of the Muse story. Right, I'm actually probably pretty close to the end of it, but I've been enjoying that a lot, and was fondly remembering Charles Soule's run on Swamp Thing, which I read in the New 52. And have actually sort of kept up with his DC stuff since then. Some of his Marvel things, obviously including this Daredevil run, I hadn't read, but was glad to be back on the Soule wagon, just because he is such a solid writer, and the artists that he's working with in this book, I think, do some really good work. I like some of the line work. There was like a couple issues that were a lot more like sketchy, I felt like, than
Mm-hmm.
what I usually get in Marvel books, which I really enjoyed. I like that kind of pulpy look to it. But Bruno, why don't you tell us a little bit about Muse, about his origin in the comics, about what he's getting up to in his gross, dark work here that we sort of see in this episode.
So as you already mentioned, Muse in the comic books is sort of like an artist styled serial killer. His whole MO is to hunt down victims off the street. It's usually like lower class, like people that are living on the street or like just
Like a Jack
like
the Ripper style, like people who
exactly
won't be
and
noticed or won't be
exactly
missed.
people who will be missed, people who you can just be snatched off and no one would care, or like especially like quote unquote the police.
Yeah.
And he will drain these people of their blood and use that blood for the paint that he uses on his murals. Now, it's interesting the take that they're using in the. I don't remember too much about how his murals worked out in the comics, and maybe you can speak about that having just read it. But in the show, I really enjoy how he's using his murals as like sort of messages to not only like attack Daredevil, which he's done 1,000 times in the comics, but also he's attacking like the system. He's attacking Kingpin, and he's like throwing all of these different like criticisms out. He's also like in last last week's episode, there was the mural of him targeting the police with like
Right.
this with the skull logo, and
Yeah, with the Punisher triggered.
and then we had that really good build up in this episode as well, where we started with a very brief appearance of him carrying someone in the streets. Did not know what that was about. and then we had like intercuts of at different moments throughout the episode of his murals,
Yep.
eventually building up to what he was doing with that victim in the tunnel.
And like the close up of his signature on one of them to really just de-ambiguify anything that's going on here, so that we can really clearly see, like, yeah, this is all what's happening. Yeah, in the comic, there's like a couple of different, there's the first mural that he paints that is like in a warehouse that some guy owns, and this guy wants to like charge tickets for people to come see it. And
Right.
that's a lot of like scuttlebutt around that. And then the second one, there's Inhumans that he like, which obviously the show doesn't. I guess they could pull in Inhumans if they wanted to. That'd be pretty wild. But I feel like we've really sort of decided those don't exist anymore.
Sorry, go ahead.
But yeah. So the second one, he's got like this sort of like grimmery where he posts up all these dead Inhumans in a scene, like a tableau. He's sort of like baiting Daredevil with like more and more extreme violent forms of murder art as he goes.
Right. I like. I don't, I'm not. I'm not sure if you're this far yet. Is he? What do you know
Is he
of?
is he an Inhuman?
Yeah,
Oh, I don't know.
I think he
Um,
is.
I am happy to do a quick Google search and see what I can find here about, is Daredevil's muse an Inhuman? So this
I believe
Reddit post from
whether an
8 years
inhuman
ago.
or a mutant, it ends up being revealed. But that's yeah. That may be for like later down the line.
Perhaps. Well, that'll be worth. Well, it is never stated to be. While never stated to be an Inhuman in story, the credits page for Daredevil 598 refers to Muse as the Inhuman artist, while the credits page for the following
Right.
two issues call him the Inhuman serial killer.
Mhm,
When
mhm,
one
mhm.
when once asked if Muse is an Inhuman, his co-creator, writer Charles Soule replied, "He seems like the kind of character it's better not to explain too much." Which is what we're seeing in the show, to be
Right.
honest. That sort of philosophy. We still don't know, and this is even on a meta level. Like obviously in the show, we've just
Mhm.
been introduced to this character. We don't know who he is, but on like a meta level of the show, like if you go to the IMDb for Daredevil Born Again, you cannot identify who is playing Muse. We have our theory because we saw that
Right.
guy who looked like he was really not doing well in that meeting with his Heather a couple episodes ago, and so we sort of pegged him as our prime suspect. But we could be totally wrong. We have no idea. And I like that as a vibe. Like I like them giving this character. We heard about like a news report or something about these murals and some killings, and then we keep seeing the murals. They're really letting this thing slow burn in a way that I think is going to work. Like I think it's going to make this character creepy to audiences, which is a hard time. Like Marvel has a hard time with
Well,
villains, and so I think that's a smart treatment.
I think the goal of this episode was to pretty much like especially like speed up that slow burn. I don't know if we're going to be slow burning things with Muse from here on out. Well, we'll still be slow burning, but it's gonna be still like slowly picking up the pace.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
Well,
this was like a full, well, not a full, but this was as close as we got to an introduction to Muse, even though we had already started seeing his murals up until now.
absolutely. And I think this is the point, right? Is that like now here we are with both Fisk and Murdoch having a harder time than ever. Right? If we go back to this theory that this
Mhm.
whole show is about these two guys trying to hold these previous versions of themselves at bay and having a really, really hard time with that. Sort of, if you pardon the analogy, like living their lives as like these dry drunks, right? Like these types of guys who like are basically just one hair's breadth away from relapsing into these problematic behaviors, right? And they're sort of just
Right.
white knuckling it to get through every day. That's really what we've seen from Fisk and Murdoch, and it seems to really be, now that we've pushed those guys as far to the edge as possible. Now let's interject some real chaos, right? Now let's get a serial killer who the city becomes obsessed with, and let's see how the mayor and this vigilante living on the edge both deal with that.
Exactly. He's going to be what makes their two paths eventually collide.
Yeah, yeah, and 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 brings that promise they made to each other in the first episode, right? About how if either of them go back to their old ways, they'll have to intervene with each other. Really, I think Muse is going to be the accelerant that brings that whole
Absolutely.
promise about. All right, in the
Well,
next, yeah.
one last thing before we move on from Muse. Do you think, because I don't think they did anything like this in the comics, but do you think they will eventually build to something between Muse and Vanessa, with the added element that Vanessa is an art collector?
Okay. Very interesting. I was going to bring this up later when we got to it, but if we're going to talk about it now, one of the big things that comes up in the Fisk family counseling scene this week is that Vanessa was so drawn to Adam's artistic abilities, right? She talks about like
Right?
his ability to draw.
Mhm.
And that did I was like, "Oh, we don't know who Muse is." And of course I had not yet seen Adam in his bad,
We'll talk about it.
upsetting cage.
Yeah. Well,
So there was a
sorry, I
point where
didn't
I
mean
was
to
like,
take us off the
"Oh,
rails.
no, 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 no." I think it's worth talking about. But that's my point. Is I was like, "Oh shit, is Adam Muse?" And
Mhm.
then so yes, I think there is a possibility of that, and I would be interested in seeing more of that. Honestly, this would be silly to the max, but even if that's like a mechanism by which Fisk and Daredevil team up, I would sort of be like okay with that as in theory. I don't know if in practice I'd be okay with it, but I'd at least be open to hearing arguments if the creative team wanted to go that direction for sure.
I would be fine if that was the direction for like one season or two, or maybe even two, but then they will still
Oh,
eventually
yeah, I
at
might
one
be okay
point.
with it for like an episode or maybe
Right.
two, but yeah.
I'm
Um,
always fine with the quick arc or two of like the villain and hero being forced to work together for a common threat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I also think that there was an aspect to Muse that I really like in terms of him fitting into the thematic resonance of this episode so well, right? Like you were talking about
Mhm.
how he does snatch up these people like for whom there is no justice, right? And we're going to talk about Leroy's case here in a second, but like he is sort of snatching up the Leroys of the world, right? And oh, if Leroy
Yeah,
gets
no, like no, Leroy's getting snatched.
if Leroy gets mused, Matt is done, man.
you just put that idea in my head.
Yeah. Okay, so then we go from the opening credits straight into a scene at a bar, which I was really guessing, like because it took a minute. Like we saw these shots getting poured, we saw the bartenders sort of dancing around, we saw somebody grab these drinks and walk through a crowd, and I had no idea who was going to be in this bar, but of course it's our guy Daniel Blake, always you know having some drinks, having a few drinks. Well, to be honest, really, if I'm completely honest, there was some ketamine also involved. I should probably stop talking, but him and BB Urich out for a night on the town of a fun night of dancing and drinking and divulging government secrets to reporters. Bruno, you can't beat it.
Yeah, no, like that was.
These two,
Someone else pointed out they left the bar at like 4:30, and she
yeah,
posted that article at like 5 a.m.
yeah. She went home and got to work. She was like, every time he went to go get another drink, she was like writing down whatever she had just been told, putting it in the next paragraph. Are these two? In the first episode, young Blake has the all-time memorable line in this season, where he talks about. When you gave me your number, I should have known you weren't actually interested, right? Like that
Right.
BB had sort of already been working him as a source to get close to the mayor. Is that relationship, do you think, I mean, we'll talk about it later, but Daniel certainly gets a talking to from his boss. Is the BB Daniel relationship over now? Or is that the end of that, or is our guy going to continue to wander into this hornet's nest?
I
Because
think
that's the thing, is in the moment he doesn't seem to realize that he is just being used as a
right.
source for an article. uh
Here's the here's the thing. I want to see more Michael Gandolfini like in the
yeah,
MCU. Genuinely, I don't want this to be like a one and done deal for him. How I would see that working is he continues to work with BB, but like he tries to turn the table on her. Like
Mm,
maybe even there's coaching from Fisk that we just don't even know about. Like it's something like behind the scenes, and then at some point when like BB releases out like a new article or something based off information Daniel gives her, like Fisk immediately turns the tables on her or something. That's what I'm thinking we're eventually going to build to. I don't I don't know where we're going to be going with like BB as like I have more skepticism about BB's future than I do for Daniel because Daniel could easily be like an underling for Fisk, and you could lead that into being like that could be the Rose, that could be another version of Spider Slayer, that could be another version of Big Wheel, that could be like so many different things that we could do with Daniel working under Fisk. I
agreed.
I don't know where we could go with BB going forward, like as BB Yurick.
No, I agree 100%. I think that's a astute assessment. I do think that you're right that there is a world where we see um, Michael Gandolfini in like Spider-Man 4 or something like that, right? In a
Mm-hmm.
villainous role. I am also more in the dark about what the BB Urich future situation is. You know, it seems to me like she's got to have an important role in the show. We talked about earlier in the show, you know, the significance of bringing back Bullseye to kill Foggy rather than just having Muse or some random shooter do it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like wanting it to be Bullseye. And we talked at when we did our recap of that episode about how we decided that Bullseye is an important character and he has gone to jail, but he will be like back in some capacity because it just seemed ridiculous to us to have that iconic villain come back and do this horrible killing only to then disappear into the jail for the rest of this show. BB Urich feels like a similar situation to me where I'm like, she is the niece of this iconic legacy character from season one, who
Right.
even if he was only in one season, his effect on the show like rippled through all of
Mm-hmm.
it, right? Like his relationship with Karen really guided her into her sort of
He
ill-advised journalism.
his death was like the whole backbone for Karen's arc.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And in the comics too, like his that is he has a similar role in the comics.
Mm-hmm.
um and so like he's an important character, so when you do something like not just make up random journalism character but or not just pull random journalist name off of the Daily Bugle roster, right? But you
Mm-hmm.
say, oh no, this is Ben Urich's niece who is investigating the Kingpin. Like you're doing that because it's important, you're making a significant decision there in the story you're telling. I agree with you. I don't really see where BB goes now, but I certainly hope it's not a similar path as her uncle. I hope that this
Oh god,
isn't.
no.
I hope that I hope Daniel Blake isn't going to kill BB the same way that Fisk had Ben killed in season one. It's a possibility, I suppose. But yeah, I want more of that character. I think there's more of that character coming, but I'm sort of like stumped right now, I guess, because it definitely doesn't seem like these two can just continue to be bar buddies, and it seems like BB's cover as just a gal who's interested in all
Mm-hmm.
of the mayor's plans is sort of been blown at this point.
Maybe she just continues like outsmarting Fisk up until a point that she like lands a job at like the Daily Bugle, and
Yeah,
then we'll see her in Spider-Man 4. Who knows?
that'd be great. I'd love it. All right, so then we go into the Leroy story. So Leroy's story is sort of the uh, legal underpinning of this week's episode. Leroy is a resident of the city who was caught stealing some caramel corn.
Yeah. Fiddle faddle,
Fiddle
fiddle faddle,
faddle.
caramel
Fiddle
corn.
faddle. Good call. Yes.
They only said it
Um,
like 30,000
they
fucking
kept
times.
saying fiddle faddle. It was an activation code or something. Like I was going to become the Winter
It
Soldier.
it reminded me of like one of those like comedy bits that they always do in like stage plays or something, where it's just like, who is he? Oh, right, the fiddle faddle thief, the fiddle faddle thief,
Yeah.
fiddle faddle
Yes.
thief.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So Matt takes that case. They don't really explain it. This, I think, sort of one of those reshoots things that you were talking about, where there's like a bunch of ADR dialogue explaining why Matt now has to go do a DA case because of horse
Right.
trading or whatever. And then he goes. He meets with Leroy. Leroy does inform Matt that it could have been a scroll. So not for nothing, but it could have been a scroll.
Okay, like, hold on. How long has it been since Secret Invasion?
Yeah, right?
Like, we haven't touched on scrolls once.
This is the first time it's come up. Leroy's on it.
Just
he knows his
randomly.
We get
It
that.
does go in line with like Matt being like, he didn't have his necklace on. It's irrelevant.
He didn't have his magic amulet, which would have magnified his powers, and of course, it could have been a scroll. We then get some legalese back and forth between Matt and Sophia, which I thought was very charming, sort of to your point about how Matt Murdock never met a pair of panties he couldn't melt. He just absolutely did some high quality lawyer maneuvering for his very guilty client who should have had a lot more time in jail than what he got. And listen, I understand Leroy's point at the end. We're going to talk about it. We're going to drill down on it. I wrote down some quotes, but I'm just saying Matt did some really good lawyering in this scene.
Oh no, absolutely. That was perfect.
Can we talk about how he says he recognizes, he brings up that it's Latvian Heritage Day.
He could tell because of the honey bread on her breath.
Because Sophia, right? Because she ate honey cake. Matt, you are not being discreet enough with your superpowers, my man. I need you to rein it in a little bit.
He's been doing this.
Yeah, yes.
He's been doing this since season 1 of Daredevil.
Well, but especially. Maybe you're right. I feel like in Born Again, he's been real reckless with him.
It's always been about the breath. He'll be like, "Oh, you want to get Thai food? I know that's your favorite food. You were just there."
Oh God, I would not. I'd be so self-conscious. And we could talk about it. Right? I would be even more self-conscious if I was in Sophia's position.
Like, ever since season 1, I've been getting these lines, and I'm like, these would not work on me. But there's a way that he says it, and there's a way that he turns it into like a joke and a pun.
And that's part of why casting Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock was incredible casting, because somebody at Netflix or Marvel saw Stardust and went, "This young man is winning and charming, and has a certain Matt Murdock je ne sais quoi." You forgot about Stardust.
My God, I forgot that was him.
Took your coffee because you forgot about Stardust, and I didn't mean to get you with that. I didn't realize it was going to be so triggering.
I was like, why is he bringing up Stardust? Oh crap, that is Charlie Cox.
It is Charlie Cox. So yeah, Matt's an incredible lawyer. He somehow gets it down to 10 days, despite the fact that we start off at 35. But there's like some weird legal maneuvering with it, right? Where it's 10 days, but really it's only going to be like 5 days. Leroy's going to be out by the weekend, is the point. Mm-hmm. And then walking through the hallways of the court building, Matt has a quick sidebar with Officer Powell, who is becoming more and more of a recurring character on this show. What do you make of all this?
I'm curious about Officer Powell especially because he didn't seem like he knew about what had happened with Hector Ayala. In fact, like he said, I had nothing to do with what happened with Hector Ayala, and he was telling the truth supposedly throughout that whole scene. So I'm interested as to like exactly how wide this like secret organization of Punisher cops like go, if he really didn't know anything about it. The other thing that crosses my mind is if this is an organization working for Fisk, and if it is an organization working for Fisk, maybe he's slipping them drugs because they do know about Matthew Murdock and Daredevil and his like lie detecting abilities or something. But that would be that would be me making the stretch. I definitely think it's more of the first option, and it's really just like pointing out how wide this organization goes, and it probably will be lasting like more than just season 1.
Yeah, I think I agree. I agree that Powell didn't have anything to do with the Hector Ayala killing. He doesn't seem like he's a great guy, but at this point, I don't have any reason to suspect he's like criminally corrupt. Although I guess he was going to try and intimidate that witness into not testifying, so that's not great. But and he was beating up a guy on the subway platform. That's how we got to know him. Okay, he's Officer Powell, not a great dude, but
Right.
the extent of his not greatness, I guess, to be determined.
Yeah, do you think, especially with the line that he mentioned about talking about like how his grandfather was a cop, his dad was a
Mm-hmm.
cop,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
all of his brothers and sisters are a cop, his cousins are cops.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think like we could eventually see Officer Powell like helping Daredevil, like at a later point down the line if they're like building something up to it with him?
That's what I'm curious about as well. Like, I feel like he is going to be. I don't even know if he has to be like some named hero from Marvel canon. Just like his role in this story seems like it's larger than what I originally expected. You know, I sort
Yeah,
of
like seeing him more than like just for the Hector Ayala situation. It seems that
yeah.
they're like they have plans for him.
Agreed. So
Yeah.
I feel like I officially started tracking him this episode, whereas before I sort of like had him just in generic goon bucket, and now I'm like after this scene in the hallway with the badge in shakedown
Hmm.
thing, which Matt again every time these two talk, Matt's like, hey, remember how I kicked your ass?
Like yeah,
um,
he brings up like how like Matt was obstructing a crime scene. Like, do you have any idea
yeah.
like that
Well,
he's a lawyer?
this is from Ian in the Ben, we joked about spoiling the Ben Affleck movie, but isn't it that movie where uh it's either that or there's some piece of Daredevil media where Daredevil tells, I believe it's Kingpin, like Kingpin finds out that Daredevil's Matt Murdock, and Daredevil says, you're not going to tell anybody because you're not going to admit that you got like beat by a blind man, basically, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I feel like that's sort of where Matt and Powell are right now. Is
Hmm.
um I don't know if Powell suspects that Matt has superpowers, but he's definitely uh, they're definitely a contentious
Right.
bunch.
No, but that line where like Powell was there to arrest him, and Matt was like, "You're gonna need to bring more
Gonna need
officers
to
than you
bring
did
more
last time."
guys. Yeah, yeah. Gonna need more guys, and faster hands. That's what you can bring. All right. We also got to look at what the inside of the Fisk marital counseling sessions look like. They were not scheming about business, which is a theory that you and I had originally had, that maybe this would all just be a front for them to be able to talk business. In general, they actually seem to be spending more time together than they had before. We'll
Yeah.
get another scene later where they're sort of having dinner together. They seem to sort of be reconciling. But in this episode, we get a lot of talk about Adam. We get some Vanessa backstory. We get a quick sidebar between Vanessa and Heather. But just in terms of the overall plot, where are you at with Fisk right now? And where are you at specifically with Fisk sort of balancing his role as the mayor with his role as the kingpin and his role as Vanessa's husband? Um, one of the theories that we had brought up earlier in this season was that if one of those things needs to break, perhaps his role as Vanessa's husband is for the first time in this show genuinely on the chopping block in a way that it hadn't been before.
Right.
What do you make of sort of his priorities and his politics these days?
I had the
And
theory.
I just because I want to say it, and his relationship with Vanessa.
Right. I had the theory at the beginning of the season that this was eventually going to build to like him being so focused on like the politics of it all that he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't realize that Vanessa is just snatching everything out from under him.
Mm-hmm.
And like and eventually it's going to get to a point where he's going to like send out an order, and that's when she's going to like pull the rug and say like, no, I don't want that to happen, or like give a different order instead. I think this episode like solidified that for me, because not only of like her openness about like all of the issues that's been happening between the two of them, and how like she's already started to like have a bit of a strain and like sort of like not care for him anymore, whereas he's trying to fight back for her. And she's already like mentioned, I'm not afraid of him.
Yeah.
And even afterwards, she was like, she was courageous enough and like bold enough to like even be honest about that with him and be like, oh, Heather is like worried about you. Heather thinks that you're dangerous.
Yeah.
So I think she's with like this amount of confidence with Vanessa, we are going to build to like a point where she is going to just take over everything from him, or at least attempt to. I don't know if she'll be able to, because it is Kingpin at the end of days, and maybe this will be something like an ultimate like point of betrayal that will like make him solidify himself as a supervillain going forward. But we'll
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see her at least attempting to sort of take the throne and him shutting her down. We'll talk about it here in a second, but he's clearly got some play with Red Hook, right? That we haven't seen the full shape of yet. But it's becoming clearer and clearer through the Red Hook stuff that his association with his criminal enterprises, his business, as they say multiple times in the. I liked that when they said at the same time, when Heather was like, "What world is Fisk a part of?" and they both say business at the same time. That wasn't shady at all, guys. But it's becoming clearer that his business and his association with Red Hook is not fully behind him. So yeah, if her resentment around him leaving and her claim over the criminal enterprise, if she doesn't back down from any of that, then I could definitely see them coming to blows. And yeah, I mean, if I know one thing about Fisk, it's that he's not going to be happy if he has to like be without Vanessa, fight against Vanessa, go against Vanessa, punish
Right.
Vanessa in any way. Like that's not going to be like, just based on what I know about this guy's brain, he's not going to be excited about that.
And then you have the added stress of like all the red tape that he's having to like struggle with at the same time.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. They need to doge that thing, man. Let's make this local mayor's office more efficient. I can't stop thinking about how appropriate this show is just for the awful times that we're living in right now. And it's just the three of them standing there and him just wanting to like, he's like, great, we're gonna make Red Hook great again. And she's like, well, you can't just do that. There's like processes, they matter. And he's like, I don't want to do any of that. I just want to doge it.
I was showing this show to like one of my best friends, and like we were watching the first episode literally yesterday. And every like 10 minutes that someone would say something about like Fisk, there was a very clear parallel, and I'd be like, "Listen, I can see it too, but like this has been a thing in the comics."
Yeah, insane that this is the time we operate in, man. But yeah, he was doging the hell out of that Red Hook plan, and the government bureaucrats were not having it, which did really make me laugh. Do we want to talk at all about the Vanessa Heather sidebar, that moment, as you mentioned, where Heather sort of checks in with Vanessa, like to make sure that Vanessa isn't worried about Fisk or in danger at all? It seems like if they are headed towards a showdown between the two of them, it's going to be relevant. And the quote that I wrote down was, Vanessa said, "My husband is capable of many, many things, some of them extreme. Hurting me is not one of them."
Right. I think for one, that's like, as I already mentioned, that's just building up to Vanessa eventually like pulling a rug from under Fisk and like taking the business from him completely. Like, because she, for the most part, she already has it. But there's gonna come to a point where she's going to tell him like straight up that she is taking control from him. That's one takeaway that I have out of the bit between her and Heather. The other bit that I got from her and Heather, based on that, is Heather is starting to kind of step on some toes a little bit, especially with that like little sidebar that she wanted Fisk out of the room for. And I think that's going to get to Fisk's head as well as to Vanessa's head, that especially like why Vanessa sort of responded in that way. Like, could that have been like as like sort of a threat to Heather? Like, don't ask that question. Don't go asking that kind of stuff around. But we'll see.
She also seemed so confident, right? Like she sort of laughed and had this like partial like, "Oh, you think," and that
Right.
there is the part of my mind that is like, okay, if we're not going to get Fisk family crime war, then what's actually happening is these two are way more on the same page than even we know, and
Oh.
in the same way that we're sort of in the dark on what Fisk's criminal machinations are, maybe we're in the dark on how on the same page these two are, and maybe it really is just their marital strife and not their criminal misgivings that we're seeing play
That's a
out
good
between
point.
them. I don't know. We'll find out. All right. So then we get to sort of the payoff of Matt and Fisk's business this week, right? Matt in the scene with Leroy, where he goes back to him and is basically saying, like, you should be so grateful to me that I got you down to like 3 days in prison. And you know, these things are supposed to go up, not down. You haven't had
Mhm.
less than 20 days in like 10 appearances in court since then. You know, I'm this great lawyer. You know, he's really flexing. He's really disappointed that this guy's not showing him more appreciation. And Leroy says the last time he went to jail, he wasn't able to get out in time to go to his food stamps interview. And because he hadn't been able to re-up that application, he ended up not
Mhm.
having the resources that he needed to feed himself. He ended up having to eat out of garbage cans and things like that. And so, you know, that whole experience was what had pushed him to commit this crime of stealing this caramel corn out of this bodega. And you know, the quote that really stuck with me in this scene was, they're willing to spend 5 times more to lock me up than they're willing to spend to feed me. And you walk
Right.
in here and you tell me that's a gift and that I should thank you. I just thought that this scene, you know, maybe a little bit on the nose, like maybe not the most nuanced, but a really, really brutal and honest look at sort of how the carceral state perpetuates itself uh,
Absolutely.
by taking advantage of disadvantaged folks and just keeping them in this mill. So yeah, I thought that this was, because yeah, like I said, like we watch Matt be all smooth and work
Mhm.
the system and get him down, and we're like, oh man, 5 days, that's incredible, way to go, Matt. And then Matt goes in and tells his client, and his client like lays it out for him, and I'm like, oh, not way to go, Matt, anymore. um,
Yeah.
the other thing that made me think of that really stuck out to me forever ago, there was, I mean, it was a Smallville, right? Is the show I'm about to
Mm.
reference, so to give you a sense of how long ago that was. But there is an early season episode of Smallville which is, of course, for anyone who doesn't know, a show about teenage Superman growing up in Kansas. And there's an early episode where Clark meets this, like, he's like a teenager, and he meets this kid who's probably like 12 or something. Um, and the kid has cancer and he's going to die.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And the whole
I,
point of
I'm caught up now.
the whole point of the episode is like Clark grappling with the fact that like he can't save this kid, right? Like he's got laser eyes and he's got super speed and he's got whatever else, but there's nothing that he can do with his powers that is going to make this kid's life easier or more livable or better in basically any way. And he's really got to grapple with the fact that just because he is Superman doesn't mean he is everyone's savior. And I felt like there was a little bit of that in this exchange, where Leroy was really just like bringing home for Matt, like what the boots on the ground realities of living impoverished in New York are like, and the fact that just because you can smell the honey bun on the opposing attorney's breath doesn't mean you can fix those problems for me, counselor. Thank you. Right? Like I
Yeah.
felt like that was really some good stuff, and the kind of thing that I like in a superhero thing, right? To show the limitations of these people's abilities.
Hmm. I I appreciate it a lot, and I think that like that specific line about like they were willing to spend more to like keep me locked up
Yeah.
than they are to feed me. I think that in itself on its own was like probably one of the most powerful lines in the episode. Maybe second to one other line that we'll probably be getting to later. But one thing that kind of held me back about this episode, that like maybe goes back into like the rewrites of it all and the writing of it all, is that up until this point they didn't really give me a reason to like Leroy or like
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
even sympathize with Leroy. Like
Yeah.
Matt showed up, he goes, "Oh, they gave me the blind
I got
dude."
the worst lawyer. I got the blind one. Yeah.
Get ready for Blonde Justice. God,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, go get me my parole.
Yeah, and then at the end of like, Matt was like, "Oh, I'll see what I can do." See, ha 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 ha! Look at
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
The man could just kept doubling down, but yeah, that held me back a bit. But aside from that, I have to agree with what you have to say. Like, it was a really
Well,
good line
and
afterwards.
that's part of it, right? Is like, Matt. They even make a joke about how Matt always wants to be like the do good lawyer, right?
Hmm.
Like the pro bono, helping the innocent, defend everybody deserves their day in court. Like that's his whole sort of prerogative, and like that includes the assholes, man. Like
Right,
just
but
because your
like,
client's a dick doesn't mean they don't deserve the best criminal defense that you can possibly provide them.
and to sort of talk on that point, like that wasn't just like a random, like that wasn't a case that he saw, sympathized with, and then was like, yeah, I'll
Right,
give this pro
right,
bono. That was
right.
something he was assigned. That was a
They got
freebie
assigned to him.
that he got randomly assigned to, with like no really like personal connection to, which is not something we're used to seeing with Matt, which was interesting.
And in that, I will say, in the comic that I'm reading right now, he works for the DA. Like they've sort of configured that
Right.
in a way. So, and that's clearly like a remnant of this, like in some capacity, maybe that was going to happen in some original version of this show, and that's why we got that awkward ADR line where Kristen calls and like just stands very far away in her very nice apartment and is like, "You have to go be a public defender this episode. Don't worry about why."
Hmm.
And Matt was like, "All right, cool, thank you."
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
all right, on the Kingpin side of things, the big payoff of everything that's been going on in his camp this week is the King of Garbage article that BB Urich writes after she gets the tip off from Daniel Blake. We talked about that aspect of it earlier. Now the article hits the papers. We've got a problem. Fisk is listening to kids sing "We Built This City," and this article drops. BB's article drops, and Sheila is finally over it. Like she will deal with Fisk deferring to Blake for reporters and putting together press conferences. She will deal with Fisk not knowing the process by which you have to go follow if you want to refurbish Red Hook. But this article comes out, and Blake shows her, and she is done. She says there is no we, and she
Hmm.
goes into crisis management mode of dealing with Fisk while also taking him over to, I wrote down in my notes here, Bruno, the Latvian embassy, not the Latverian embassy, just in case anybody misheard anything there. No doom yet. Would you make of sort of how Sheila deals with this, how Blake deals with this, how Fisk deals with this
The
road
writing's on
bump
the wall
in
for
the
Sheila,
first
man.
100 days? Yeah, buddy.
She
Agreed.
she was like, when she was like, I was here long before the two of you. I'll be here long before after the two of you. I was like, no, you won't.
Yeah,
You
I'm
most
worried that
certainly
that's
will
not the case.
Um, but it was interesting how she was at first sort of willing to take the fall for Daniel before Daniel was just like, nope,
Yeah,
it was me. I did it.
definitely. Yeah,
um,
right. She didn't throw him under the bus or anything. She was just like, we've got a problem. We're dealing with it.
yeah,
And, she took it head on. Like, I thought she did deal with it in a really
it, it
effective
really
way.
it really showed like how professional she is, and like how she's trying the hardest to be patient with Fisk, and how Fisk is trying to like take on the situation, and it's
Yeah.
going to reach a boiling point where she is going to snap back at him and not realize that she's biting more than she can chew.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I was surprised that even, there's this really excellent move. So like we follow Fisk as he sort of gets like more and more enraged about this, from the elementary school to the Latvian embassy, and then back to the mayor's office where he brings in everybody for an all staff meeting and
Why was it
just
the
sort of,
same song?
okay, I thought about
Why
this.
was it the same song?
Well, it must be like a campaign song or something.
Okay, right.
Like he used it in the campaign ad or something, and so now like everybody sings it to him. That seemed like a specific from a political campaign though, right? Where like that "Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow," maybe everybody sang that to Bill Clinton
Right.
in the 90s or something. But yeah, right. I would get so sick. And that's, you can tell that's the part of the job he's not good at, right?
Right.
Like he can sit there and do the diplomacy thing, right?
Mhm.
Like he's been good at that for a long time, and he even talks about this when he talks about his dad and like learning things from his dad. He's like, I can do the glad handing, but the being ineffective, right? Like
Right.
he doesn't mind at all sitting there listening to the kids sing "We Built This." Like he doesn't want to do a second song, but I don't blame him for that. It was pretty rough. Um, but
They
like
were so off key.
they sing him the song and he stands up and he applauds and he makes a really big deal about how great they all are. That he's
Mhm.
fine with. But then when they go to the embassy, now that he knows there's a problem and he's not dealing with the problem, now he's like furious. And we see all that rage come out back at the office in the all hands meeting. And Blake confesses. He says, it was me. I was the leak. And Fisk says everybody out. And Blake tries to walk out with everyone else. And I'm like, absolute hero of an effort, my guy. Like that was never gonna work. You were right in front of him. You just said that you were the person who did the thing. He says everybody get out. You were not like you think he was just gonna be like,
Like, you were making eye contact with him, and you broke eye contact to try to leave.
you too, Daniel. I have nothing more to say to you about this. Yeah, no, I think he's gonna want to talk a little bit, my guy. But I mean, that's the thing is in that moment when he like takes full accountability and Fisk like puts his hand on his shoulder and tells him like you're never going to do this again, and Blake says I won't, and Sheila's watching them from outside of that bubble, and I feel like that if I'm her in that moment, that's when I know my goose is cooked. Is like this kid might not have my job today, but he's going to have my job very soon, even if I do everything I'm supposed to all the time.
Mhm.
And so yeah, like I think the rise of Daniel Blake and the fall of Sheila, whatever her last name is not far off.
Nope.
Donald Blake. I keep saying Daniel Blake. Is it
Daniel Blake.
Donald?
It is
Daniel.
Donald Blake is the fake doctor name that Thor
That's
takes
right.
on.
We keep doing this. That Thor's cane wielding secret identity.
Yep.
All right. Then this brings us to Punisher. And this is really sort of the heart of the episode. I know you really wanted to talk about this. Can't believe we've been going for over an hour already and we haven't talked about Punisher. We could
Oh
probably
my
do
god.
a whole hour just on the Punisher scene, but so Matt goes out into the streets. He's trying to solve the killing of Hector. He kind of goes to the intersection where Hector dies. Bruno, are you a fan of the Fast and Furious franchise at all?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's
Well,
Fast.
up until a certain point.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I think it's Fast 5, but it might be after that. But there's one of the like middle installments where Michelle Rodriguez's character Lottie
Mhm.
has died.
Right.
Spoilers for that, she hasn't, but we think she has. And um, Vin is like trying to solve her murder, her street racing murder, and so he goes to like the part of the road where she was killed, and he like suddenly for one scene and one scene only gets superpowers where he can like tell where the cars went and what
Yes.
happened. I could not help but think of that when Matt was here at this intersection and like a bike went by and like
It was the fourth one, by the way. It's the Fast and
it's
Furious
4.
that doesn't have a number.
Oh right, yeah, right, that's the reboot. Okay, that makes sense then. um and then Matt like follows this like shot, like this party shot bottle of empty bottle of rum or whatever
Mhm.
as it's like rolling into the sewer, and that leads him to find the shell casing, and the shell casing has, we don't see it, but the Punisher logo on the side, and that sends him, I guess he just
Yeah.
knows where Frank hangs out, so he goes to Frank's base and
Right.
confronts
That was a good establishment that like he knew exactly where
he
Frank
knows where
had
to
been
find
like
Frank.
holding up.
Yeah, I like that. I thought it was interesting because like that sort of thing feels more to me like a universe of heroes
Mhm.
than a lot of the stuff that we get now, uh even in like the big team up Avengers movies and stuff, right, where they like all have each other's phone numbers or whatever. I'm like, no, Matt just knows like if I go this way, that's where Frank hangs out.
Right. Also, Frank
And
doesn't have a phone.
No, 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 no. There is a fax machine in an office that if you send a fax to, Frank might get back to you.
Yeah.
The but yeah, these two. I mean, I made the joke earlier about them kissing, but these two just cannot with each other, right? Like I get that they're sort of like as
Just
metaphors of characters, they sort of stand for completely opposite things, and that's
mhm.
like why they're compelling together. And these two actors are both so good. Um, and of course, I love the Punisher stuff from season 2 of Daredevil. So going back to that was really, really fun. But yeah, I mean, boy, they just were not having it with each other today, huh?
I mean, they were swinging from the very second
Yeah.
they saw each other, and then even after Frank noticed it was red for a split second, he goes, "I kind of still want to hit him."
Yeah, right, right. So Frank immediately jumps on Murdoch. Murdoch is like, whoa, 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 but it's me, it's me. But then is really like getting at him with, like nice looking place you've got here, as like it's just guns and like
Right.
grenades, and then like a big wall that's just a whole conspiracy board, but it's like on a warehouse wall.
Mhm.
Um, he says, if you wanted to, you know, you could do some good with this stuff if you wanted to be of service. And Frank says, service? Is that what you are? You of service? You serve? You put on your costume and run around and save some people? Thank you for your service. But yeah, he's
God.
just getting right into it. He's like, come at me. Uh,
Mhm.
and then Matt says, "Oh, I didn't realize you were a victim in all this." And he says, "I never used that pussy ass word. Don't you put it in my mouth." Just some really, really great Punisher stuff. And I love how Barenthal plays the Punisher. Like he understands who that guy is. He even makes the joke, like when Daredevil asks him about the bullet, he calls them fanboys, which I thought was just a
Absolutely.
great way of taking the issue head on. What did you? I mean, I was excited for this, but I feel like you are more of a Punisher guy than I am, and so I'm curious what your reaction to seeing Frank in this story was, and how you liked him and Matt reuniting on the Disney Plus app.
Being both a Punisher guy and a John Bernthal guy, this was just like everything that I was looking for out of his reintroduction into the MCU and more. Because like they even like win us like or this feels to me like it was all just choices from Bernthal to just make sure to add in the layers of Frank's trauma from his wife and kid,
Yeah, yeah,
specifically his kid, and like how he has like that ongoing like voice in the back of his head just telling him to like continue to do this punishing. I thought that was really good, and it's building up really well, not only to what we'll be seeing later this season for Frank and Punisher, but to hopefully eventually that Punisher project that we've been hearing about that John Berthal's going to be writing.
yeah,
um I think it was really good. The interaction itself between Frank and Red was very, to me, reminiscent of the Chip Zdarsky run, which I've talked about repeatedly. In in that run, Matt encounter goes through sort of a similar thing. Rather than him dealing with a friend's death, he has inadvertently killed somebody during a mugging, and I think it's an issue 4 of the Zdarsky run that he runs into Punisher, and they have like pretty much this same conversation of Punisher telling him why he does what he does and why he needs Matt backing him up as well. And I thought that was and I thought we had a really good parallel with some really good differences from that in the show, just like laying into him and sort of like weaponizing like the grief that Matt has had not only on Hector, but then like delayering that, like pulling the layers back of that, and showing the true thing that Matt is grieving over, which is Foggy, like a year later.
What about Foggy? Did he get life?
That is the line that I was pointing to.
That
That
went
is,
so fucking. I mean, the opening of "I don't think you came here for my help. I think you came here for my permission." Like that
that
one went so crazy fucking hard. But then, what about Foggy? Did he get life? I was just like, wind knocked out of me, because that is
mhm,
the whole. I mean, that is the difference between these two guys' like view of the world, right? Is that
right.
like Frank's whole thing is like, they killed your buddy, you should kill them. And
Mhm.
Matt's like, no, justice systems.
And
but Matt
this
dropped a guy off a building, right?
and like again, I rewatched episode 1 of Born Again yesterday. Like Matt has been struggling with the whole fact that Bullseye got life from episode 1, because you see him being handed like 3 consecutive life sentences, and Matt is not happy about it. He is like shaking in his seat. Like
Yeah.
he wanted the justice system
Yeah.
to work in a way that he would have gotten death penalty. He wanted Bullseye dead, but like even through the justice system, it didn't work out, and
Yeah.
that's going to be itching at him. Like up until he finally does something about it, that's going to be itching at him.
Yeah, right, 100%. And I do think that was, I was sort of reminded of the scene from Hannibal Lecter stuff, right? It's both in Manhunter, the Michael Mann film, and then later on it's in the Red Dragon. I think it's in Red Dragon, the Edward Norton Hopkins movie,
Right.
where
Okay.
where Hopkins has the monologue. It's Hopkins obviously in Red Dragon, and then I can't remember who plays Lecter in the Michael Mann movies, but the whole notion that the Edward Norton detective character has come to visit Lecter not because he needs anything from Lecter, he just needs to like sort of get himself into the headspace of serial killers again. And Lecter calls him out on that. He says like, "Hey man, I know that I'm crazy, but you don't need to come see me. You're pretty crazy yourself." And that this scene sort of reminded me of that scene and other pieces of great literature like that, right? Like where you kind of go, even the Batman did something similar. It was cut out. We didn't actually get to see this scene, right? But where he goes to talk to the Joker, because the Barry Keoghan Joker, because he's got to hunt down Riddler. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to like gloss over this scene without really getting into it too much, but I think we're gonna see more. I've got to hope that this is not a series wrap on John Barenthal, right? Like let's get him popping off a lot in the second half. I don't know if he'll show up much more in these first 9 episodes, but I want him in the fight in part 2, if nothing else.
Absolutely, I agree. I think it's definitely not the last we've seen of John Bernthal. Period. And I think we'll be seeing him maybe soon. Maybe we'll be. I have another question in relation to that, but we'll wait until we're closer to the end.
Oh, great. Well, so then we sort of get both of our guys. We get Fisk and Murdoch both with their ladies. Fisk with Vanessa and Matt with Heather. Just sort of unwinding at the end of the day. The Fisks sharing a drink. Vanessa tells Wilson about the interaction with Heather, where Heather asked if Vanessa felt safe. And Vanessa asks Fisk if she should feel safe. Sort of our first indication that there may be this rift that we've been theorizing about actually developing, right? Because when Vanessa's talking to Heather, she seems very confident. She's putting up a real powerful front. No, I have nothing to worry about with Wilson. But when it's just the two of them at home alone at the end of the day, she does sort of want to confirm that, right? It seems like she still believes it, but she just wants to make sure that she still should be believing it. On the Matt side of things, he goes back to his apartment. Heather's there. Matt starts undressing. They are sort of kissing and talking about how they like living together. And then in the middle of the night, Matt wakes up and goes up to his roof and touches his Daredevil costume and starts practicing with his whipping sticks. And Fisk walks past his white painting that still has the blood stain on it, I noticed, from season 3.
Yep.
Walks past his white painting and goes to eat a hearty meal while he tortures the guy that fucked his wife.
But like my favorite part about that was just the meal, because
it looks really good.
Point,
it looks
just
really
seeing,
yummy.
like egg white omelet, stock of asparagus,
yes,
and then all of a sudden just like a mountain of penne and like
which is
4 sausage links.
Yeah, and way more in line with the old version of that character, right? Indulging. And like that's absolutely what this sequence is for both these characters, is them indulging in the stuff that they enjoy, the stuff that makes them feel fulfilled, but the stuff that they like really know they shouldn't do, right? Like the same way that Fisk is eating this huge plate of carbs and fat, and despite the fact that he's clearly on some kind of diet or something. Because of all the egg whites and asparagus, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
He's having the same attitude about that pasta as he is with Adam, right? He's like, oh, I really shouldn't be eating this, and I really shouldn't be torturing this man. But like he really wants to, right? And the same way with Matt. Matt's like really trying not to be Daredevil, but he really wants to. I mean, we could go back to that joke we were making at the beginning of the episode and say that, you know, Fisk is like, I'm not being the Kingpin right now. I'm just eating pasta. But yeah, he's very close to being the Kingpin.
He's gonna get caught one day. He's just gonna go, we built this city.
We built this city. I built this city on rock and roll for you, the people. Yeah, very possible. I do like that he keeps having to say like hollow, empty platitudes about New York, and he's so bad at, like, when he left the school after all the kids sang, he was like, I really must be going, as you know, the city never sleeps. All right, fine, Wilson, whatever, man.
Yep.
So that's the episode. Anything that we didn't give enough time to that you wanted to double back on? Anything that really stood out to you? Favorite parts? Stuff you're looking forward to in the future? Or anything like that?
Like we've pretty much covered everything. My favorite scene was hands down the Frank Castle scene, but I think that's the same
really
for everybody.
Yeah.
My question to you is: do you think, like, with how it ended with Matt, do you think we're already going to be seeing like Daredevil like next episode, or is it going to be like? Are we going to wait a bit?
Next week is the double episode drop, the two-parter, which makes me think that yes, we will get costume. The way that this episode,
I guess my question is, I think we're definitely getting it like next week. My question is, do you think we get it like start of episode 5? Do you think we get it closer to episode 6? Only in episode 6?
I think probably if I had to lay money, my guess would be that we maybe see him. We see the costume in some capacity in 5, maybe. Mm-hmm. But that it is really materially only 6 where he's like superheroing. That maybe like the end of 5 is that he like goes up to the roof or something like that
and like opens it. I see. We're gonna get more builds, more from being like, I'm not Daredevil.
Right. Yeah. That's my guess anyway. What about you? What do you think?
I don't know, because like the specific way that it ended with like seeing him like already doing some sparring with like the nightsticks. I wonder if we're going to be getting something like even if it's just like abrupt to us, just like 10 minutes into episode 5, or like something like right before the intro, one of those kind of shots.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
All right, and how are you feeling about the season so far? Where do you rank this episode amongst the ones you've gotten so far, or even just on a scale of 1 to 10, anything like that? Just sort of give us your quality thoughts about this episode and how we're doing so far in this season.
Honest to God, if I sat down and like nitpick this episode with the stitching of it all and like the rewrites of it all, I could probably put it at like the bottom of the totem pole right now. Considering the whole totem pole right now looks pretty great. Mm-hmm. Like from first episode to 4th episode, it looks pretty great. I would probably be putting this like towards the bottom. However, that Frank scene.
Yeah, man.
I think I'm making this my number 2 episode.
So for me, the Frank stuff. No, so I texted you because I had dialed up the app and I just like went to Daredevil Born Again, and Frank like was the thumbnail. I was just like, yes, Punisher. So the Frank stuff was really exciting to me, but then also the Angela stuff and the Leroy stuff I thought were both really well written and more substance than I expected this show to be ready to grapple with, right? And so for those reasons, for me, this is going to be, I think, my top episode of the season so far, because it really has been going. I feel like each episode I've sort of liked more than the one before it. Like, I
Mhm.
really liked that opening foggy sequence in episode 1, but after that, I was kind of like, I felt like we were just sort of reacting to that opening for the rest of the episode. Episode 2, I was like, okay, I get that this is what that other show was going to be,
Right.
but this isn't as bad as, like, I could do this. I'm sort of down with this. Then
Mhm.
last week's episode with all of Matt's legal tomfoolery and stuff, I was sort of like, oh, this is compelling. And of course, that ending was so good.
Yeah.
And then yeah, like I just think these keep getting better. So I'm really curious about what's going to happen next week to warrant a 2-part episode drop. And also to do it in that way, right? Where they're putting out 2 episodes and not like just one massive episode or whatever. Like this
Right.
is they're clearly
If like my question is, if you're gonna have a 2 episode drop, why isn't it the last week? Like, why are you having it
yeah,
here in the
right.
middle?
Right. So what's going to happen there has me really curious. So
Right.
yeah, we'll definitely be back next week talking about it.
Right.
Until then, thank you so much for listening. Remember that if you're an audio only listener, you can catch all this on YouTube, youtube.com/nerdhearefirst, or on our website, nihf.com. While you're there, you can also sign up for our newsletter to get everything we do delivered straight to your inbox. One click, just type in your email address. It's absolutely free. And you get everything we do. Also, if you want to follow us on the socials, we are at Nerd It Here First, basically wherever you are. What social media platforms you are or are not on at this point is between you and your God. And I will leave that to you. And yeah, until next week. I can't think. I feel like we did all the lines.
I built this city on blood and guts.
We built this city on gross murals made out of people's blood.